Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Funkable Operator Podcast, Episode 50, Part 2. This is Jay Funkadelic, live from Contis Bakery once again. I am the Funkable Operator, teaching y'all about knowing the facts of the life that you put yourself into that makes you a better rapper. There's a lot of MCs out there that don't know how to spit a dope lyric in his life. Why would I really give a damn about you talking crap about me, how to spit? I can forget all that and thinking about how would you think about my lifestyle? How would you think that I recommended to be a better MC? Y'all would notice for a fact, you will notice for the time being that I am a lyricist. I am the man that puts the pen to the paper, that says it in the vocal booth when I'm in the studio, doing my own thing, rapping like never before, okay? I'm feeling rappers like KRS-One, Ice-T, Slick Rick, Nas, Jay-Z, Biggie Smalls, Tupac, etc. Jay Funkadelic is an artist that knows what he's talking about and being realistic from the stuff that you understand. Why would I be so popular talking about hip-hop music? Why would I ever say something like this? Why would I ever think for a fact that you meant what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? Say it like this. I have my own Foxy Brown picture, you see. How many of y'all got a photo with Foxy Brown? Do you remember this? This is at Prodigy's funeral back in 2017. Sorry about that. Foxy Brown is one of my favorite rappers from the 90s. If it wasn't for Foxy Brown, there'll be no Lola Brooke, there'll be no Ice Spice, there'll be no Cardi B, there'll be no Nicki Minaj if it wasn't for Foxy Brown and Lil Kim from the Sex and Hip Hop. Before that was Salt and Pepper, the Sequence. Well, those rappers had coats on from being female rappers. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about, right? All these rappers making it swear to be somebody in the own league. You know what I'm saying? This is my new album dropping 1 week from today. Funkable is forever. And always will be, because I remain the Funkable Operator on the MIC. This is the official album cover to Funkable is forever. You know what I'm saying? That was the new album cover to my new project dropping October 8th, 1 week from today. How would I even mention about me coming out with an album, spitting facts, and rap about all these situations with people, being known to do what you need to do? You know? All these rappers have to really get me started to spit something hotter than you thought it would be the greatest thing ever. I would mention something like that. You know? I would like to put my mind in full effect. The way it goes down, the way I see things, the way it's more popular in life. You know I got it made. You know I really, you know, I'm the real deal of rap. I'm the real deal of counting money, working on my job. I'm live from Contis Bakery. You know what I'm talking about? I'm seeing everything in life the way it should be, the way I can handle a situation. You know? Ah, cigarettes? Yeah. You be talking, saying what you say. I didn't really think about the roots, but I'm all right. I'm just hanging out by Contis Bakery working on my job. This is my job that I'm talking about. This is where I work at Meth Fresh. That's my new job. Understand? I'm all right. I'm just on a big break. This is the Funkable Operator Podcast, episode 50, part 2. I know you're thinking I'm talking out of my mind, but I'm being realistic from the stuff that I'm saying. Yeah, they're good, the Conti cupcakes. The cake is good. I had the Funkville Forever 2 mixtape cake. One time it was my birthday. You know? Don't you realize that I used to live around the corner from Conti's back in the 80s? Back in the early 80s, I was on Barnes Avenue. I lived across the street from the Conti. So was my late great-grandmother, rest in peace. Sadie Conti was my grandmother, my father's mother. Sadie Conti. 94, she passed August 27 of 2010. She's been dead for 15 years. Imagine what I'm talking about. 15 years she's been dead. And I pray for her every time. You know what I'm saying? A lot of y'all think I live in the Bronx. You know what I'm saying? But I do. I live and die in the Bronx all my life. Ain't no borough like the Bronx, like the birthplace of hip-hop music. When I be one of those guys that be saying all this talk, that talk. The Bronx is a beautiful borough. You know what I'm saying? It's a great place to live. You know what I'm saying? I didn't care if I lived in Brooklyn, Long Island, New Jersey, but the Bronx is the spot where I grew up in the hood for the whole borough that I've been living in. I've been traveling, I've been getting around, and I've been living my own life to the goddamn fullest. That's the way y'all see it. Do you believe in God? I know y'all do, for the record straight. I talk about all my ability of watching all these movies like Goodfellas, A Bronx Tale, Casino, Lethal Weapon 1, 2, and 3, RoboCop, Batman, Batman Returns, all these movies that I've been checking out over the years were dope, like Batman Forever, similar to them being Funkville Forever. You can check my music on all platforms. I got a Spotify. I have an Apple Music. I have all platforms. You can check my music out. But my albums are really dope. You can't even hardly listen to the beat. Just listen to my lyrics. You'll understand. You'll understand it better when you rock mics. Talking about being the Dark Knight of Funkville and saying what you say about this picture. That I am the Dark Knight of Funkville. When I sampled the Batman, right? The Funkville came to sample from Batman. Is when this is my sampling hip hop image that I used from watching Batman from the 1960s. Okay, when I was a toddler watching Batman, I used to like Burgess Meredith, Cesar Romero, Adam West, Burt Ward, and the other people that played in Batman in the 1960s. When I was growing up, I was watching Batman from 20th Century Fox. Because Batman was a good show. I remember watching the cartoon. You know what I'm saying? I remember watching the movies of Batman, the Batman Beyond, and like Jack Nicholson as the Joker, Danny DeVito was the Penguin, Halle Berry that played in Catwoman, and Jim Carrey that played as the Riddler. You know what I'm talking about? How many of y'all remember watching Batman back in the day? How many of y'all been watching the black and white 1930s Batman? Because there was I did a research on Batman No, I didn't do the research. The music teacher in high school gave me a research of Bob Kane's original Batman. And it was so dope that Batman didn't have a Batmobile back in the 1930s. They had original cars they were driving. It wasn't even a Batmobile. It was a car, and Batman looked it very different in black and white. You know, Batman from the 1930s. Well, the show was all right. I wasn't really feeling it. Since then, the 1960s Batman came out. Do you know the first Joker was a Latino brother named Cesar Romero, the one that played in Ocean's 11 with Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin. I remember watching those type of flicks. How do y'all remember Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin? That was my father's era. That was my pop's era right there. That was his generation. You know what I'm talking about? Like Frank Sinatra was a good singer. I sampled one of his records to make hip hop beats. You know, I sampled a lot of good records to do samples and put them on wax. But I was never on wax. I was on an MP3 file. And I put my records on a CD and a cassette. I have an unreleased, I believe I have an unreleased hip hop song that y'all never heard before. And I have a rap song that I never heard in 30 something years. It was called JB's Coming Through. That was one of my first hip hop breakout songs. I was like about 13 that time. I was like 13 years old when I dropped bombs on that record. That was one of my first rap songs ever in high school that I performed. That was one of my first rap songs I ever did. First ones. That was my first hip hop breakout song, but it was only a demo. You know what I'm saying? That song was a demo. Before I came in the studio and started spitting like an animal when they played my stuff on the funky piano. You know, pianos with hip hop, trumpets with hip hop. Because back in the day when Kool Herc started hip hop, and he used a record player to make it a great instrument. He used two record players and speakers to make it an instrument from sampling music and the beats from James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, Palm Funkadelic, Isaac Hayes, George Clinton, and etc. From him doing all those beats, making the instrumentals make hip hop sound like a merry-go-round from doing the beats. You know, like Grandmaster Flash started when I was born. When I was an infant, Grandmaster Flash was out. I'm sorry, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five was out because Grandmaster Flash came with a scratch and a mix like 49 years ago, and I couldn't believe when I was hearing him scratch up the records and be on the wheels of steel. In my generation, it was Mr. Magic, Marley Marl, and it was Red Alert and Chuck Chillout back to back on 90.7 Kiss FM. Before that was WHBI, K-Day on AM radio when they played hip hop, and when they played BLS on hip hop. You know what I'm saying? 107.5 WLS was the home of hip hop for me because how many of you remember you take the songs back in the day on the radio airwaves? How many remember you had a cassette tape and you recorded hip hop hip hop mix shows on the radio? How many of y'all remember like recording the freestyles on every mix show there was from back in the mid and early and late 80s and early 90s and mid 90s and late 90s that you've been hearing hip hop in the nighttime, it wasn't even a 24/7 hip hop station yet. But you know, if you don't like my music, if you don't respect rappers like Public Enemy, Run DMC, Coochie Rap, Big Daddy Kane, you don't respect the Juice Crew, you don't respect Boogie Down Productions, you're not even a hip hop fanatic. You're not. You would have to learn about the whole culture. And I'm telling you this because hip hop is very authentic than it was before it was ratchet. You gotta respect Grandmaster Flowers. You gotta respect Disco King Mario. You gotta respect Grandmaster DST. You gotta respect Cutmaster DC, King Cut. You gotta respect Houdini, the Fat Boys, the Herculoids. You gotta respect Coke La Rock and Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation and the Black Spades. You gotta respect them people before it was your time. Because back in the day, when I was in middle and high school, I did a research on all hip hop before there was an internet. Before the internet, there was radio, TV, and magazines. And the cassette tapes that we bumped when all the record stores were open like nobody beats the Wiz, Tower Records, HMV. There was all record stores. They used to sell CDs before there was the internet, before you had to download a record, before there was technology with music. You know, you would have to go to the store and buy the records and pick the records that you love. You know what I'm talking about? This is my own real deal of listening to rap the way you like listening to your own stuff, and make sure you get it popping. You know, back in the year of 1988 was one of the best years for hip hop music, period. Because I was from that era. I was like a kid in 1988. I was like about 11 when I was hearing hip hop. I started knowing about the songs when I was 11, but I heard rap on the radio, but I didn't know who sung the record at those times. There was no social media. There was no YouTube. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. You know what I'm saying? And every time I went to the rap section, when I went to the record store, I didn't know who these artists were because they were new to me at that time. You know what I'm saying? That was very new to me that time because I heard rap like in the early, mid, and late 80s, but I didn't know who sung that record because there was no YouTube that time. You couldn't type like an artist and get results. You couldn't do that back in the day. Because you know what? The only thing I was watching was beach was what's that? It was Video Music Box, Yo TV Raps, and it was BET Rap City. There was 106 in Park, and you had the BET Top 10 Countdown, and you had TRL. You had 106 in Park. Back in the day when I was at my aunt and uncle's house in the early 80s, I was watching MTV. That was the only station I wanted to watch because it felt like you was watching a station full of music videos from Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna, freestyle music. It was love. It was all love from hearing all that good tunes. You know what I'm saying? Because I heard a lot of hip hop from back in the day, but I didn't know who this artist was. You know, I didn't know who they were. You would have to write it down on a piece of paper, and you would have to ask who sung that record. That time there was no social media. There was no social media back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. There was none. None of that. There was no access to the internet about hip hop back in the day. There was no access to that shit. Until later on in the future, it was out. There was no YouTube. There was no MySpace. There was no Facebook. There was none of that stuff. There was no taking photos with celebrities. You would have to have a digital camera to get a photo with somebody. You would have to buy a cassette tape back in the day. You would have to buy a record to play it on the needle. And you would have to get a CD to push it in the CD player and play the record. That was our technology before the phones came out. That was the technology that we used back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Like the box TV set. That was our YouTube, watching live TV. There was no cable. There was no hip hop stations. There was none of that stuff. You would have to wait at nighttime to listen to real hip hop, to use a blank cassette, a Memorex to take songs off the radio. That was that generation that time. When I used to live across the street from Barnes Avenue, when I lived across the street from that area, I remember those days. You know what I'm saying? Picture this. You understand my mind is full with a lot of pride and joy. You understand what I'm talking about. Back in the day, this was our technology. You know what I'm saying? There was no Serato. There was no tractor. This was our technology back in the day from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s. What do y'all think about them things? Why would you like to hear good music, like the R&B records? Because a lot of rappers back in the day sampled classic solid gold oldies. Rap from the like R&B from the 70s and 60s and 1950s back then. Rap a lot like singers like John Bon Jovi, Chuck Berry, you know what I'm saying? Like listen to Guns N' Roses or like the Beastie Boys or Metallica or any type of rock and roll songs like Orange Crush when they did that Sucker MCs by Run DMC. You know, you gotta respect these icons. If you don't, why you don't like hip hop music? There's a lot of people that don't like hip hop music for the fact what I'm talking about. What I really recommend is to see something like that in life. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand I believe about the culture we all live in? Look at all these female rappers that was wearing coats back in the day. And they had clothes on. That wasn't like half naked. There was a lot of rappers, there was a lot of female rappers back in the day that did not walk around the streets naked at all. They never did that. They never did it. Rappers had clothing. They had the fashion from Dapper Dan. Rest in peace to Mr. C. Rest in peace to Bismarcky. Rest in peace to DJ Polo. And rest in peace to Super Rock and Mr. Magic. You know what I'm saying? Do you remember when Bismarcky had EPMD do their own shows? You think about Rob Bass, It Takes Two. You think about Twilight 22, Electric Kingdom, coming out with Ice-T, the coldest rap, or Reckless, or the stuff that he did back in the early 80s when he played in that movie Breaking 2. When he was like a breakdancer doing all his movies, Ice-T. Ice-T is a real legend. If it wasn't for Ice-T, there'd be no Snoop Dogg, there'd be no NWA, there'd be no Too Short, there'd be nobody. If it was for Ice-T or Schoolie D. You gotta remember this, because I was watching Dream Dance by Ice-T. Here's how it goes. PSK, what does it mean? And Ice-T said, like, 6 in the morning, police at my door. Ice-T took that slang from Schoolie D. When PSK went, like, look at him, Makuchi, it's about that time. How many of y'all remember that? How many of y'all remember? Because when I was in the record store, there was all Schoolie D tapes, cassette tapes. that I was looking at, but I wasn't really feeling him that much. I was feeling rappers like Ice-T. I was feeling Public Enemy that time, Big Daddy Kane vintage album. I was thinking about a lot of good stuff like Prison Records with Biz Markie, 1-2, and the Doodoo, and Making Music with Your Mouth with Cutmaster Cool V and DJ Spawn. You know what I'm saying? Like the original Spinderella that was on that Hot, Cool, and Vicious album with Salt and Pepper and Finesse and Sequence. The first female DJ, the first female rapper that was on Jeff Jam was not Foxy Brown. It was Nikki D. And she's from Jersey, my friend. From New Jersey. And that's where Rod Digger, Apache, Queen Latifah was from. Do you know what I'm talking about? And Naughty by Nature. And Laws on the Underground. Tretch, Vinny, and KG equals Naughty by Nature. With the Hip Hop Array and the OPP and the Feel Me Flow record and Take It to Your Face. But the rappers got respect from Mount Vernon. If it was for Heavy D, there'd be no Locks. There'd be no Puff Daddy. There'd be no Albie Shore. There'd be no Pete Rock. There'd be no DJ Eddie F. You know what I'm talking about? Hip-hop was all over the world. They got hip-hop from Texas. You got hip-hop from Germany, New Zealand. You got like hip-hop from international stations that you listen to on Chuck D's app called Rap Station. And Rock the Bells, I'll be hearing the same old school stuff. But they play some new stuff like once in a blue moon. But I'm really feeling it because, you know, you stay paid in full like Airbnb and Rakim. When it came out with Eric B for President, or that record I Ain't No Joke, or Paid in Full, or Chinese Arithmetic, or Follow the Leader, or Lyrics of Fury, Microphone Fiend, and Beats to the Listeners, and Eric B Never Scared. You know? You gotta think of the early days of hip-hop, how it used to sound, and thinking about, about Professor Griff, Luke Skywalker Records, with Uncle Luke and the 2 Live Crew when they did that record, Me So Horny, or you think about that record, Pop That Coochie, or thinking about Baby Got Back in the early 90s when hip-hop had that Miami bass sound. You know what I'm saying? Because if it wasn't for Uncle Luke, there'd be no 2 Live Crew, there'd be no hip-hop Miami ever. There'd be no DJ Khaled, as a matter of fact. Because Uncle Luke broke barriers from hip-hop coming at him with that Miami bass sound. You know, Uncle Luke broke barriers because he's a rap icon. Rest in peace to Fresh Kid Ice, and rest in peace, shout out to Brother Marquise from the 2 Live Crew. I had that Me So Horny on vinyl, and I had to Get the F Out of My House on vinyl. You know? How many of y'all remember that song Rap Man, or like Men Without Hats, or Cool Chip, or Chuck Chill Out, Curtis Blow, all these rappers like DJ Heavy Kev, Waterbed Kev, and all these good dudes that be spitting dope lyrics in their life, thinking that they want to be popular, like the Skinny Boy, Spotted MC, Lakim Shabazz, Tim Dog, Said G, and all these dope rappers like KD, T-Bone, the Lynch Mob, Ice Cube. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta respect rappers like Yo-Yo, MC Light, Finesse and Sequence. You gotta respect people that became before you, like Professor X, ISIS, Brother J, and all these type of rappers like Sugar Shaft. That was the X-Clan era to the East Blackwoods from the 1990s. You gotta respect me, because I know my knowledge and wisdom from hip-hop, from the Temple of Hip-Hop, from Boogie Down Productions with KRS-One, Miss Melody, Harmony, Jamalski, and D-Nice, Mick Boo, ICU, and DJ Kenny Parker, overseen by DJ Scott LaRock. You know what I'm talking about? You know how hip hop is very phenomenal, like listen to Castle D? How you recommend that? I'm out. Jay Funkadelic, the Funkable Operator Podcast, episode 50, part 2 comes to a close. I'll check you out in the next one. Peace.